Hi, I'm Ross Hoarder, and I'm going to be talking today about our paper, Softlock Detection in Super Metroid Computation Tree Logic. There's a couple unfamiliar terms in the title. Softlock Detection, Super Metroid, and Computation Tree Logic might all be unfamiliar. So let's go through and talk about them each. Here's a softlock. This is just a stitched together picture of a hypothetical Mario level. You can see that Mario can jump over the top of this pit. And if he does, he can make it to the flag. But if you mess up your jump and fall into the pit, then you'll be permanently stuck. There's no way to die because there's a floor. There's no enemies around that can kill you. You're just sitting there stuck. And basically your only option, if you own the game, is to reset the console and try again. As frustrating as getting stuck in this pit is, though, it's not actually that challenging to detect this type of thing automatically for Super Mario Brothers. Essentially, we'd be building a system that's nothing more than a glorified pit that's too deep detector. And so for this paper, we focused on a game called Super Metroid, which has a lot more modern game mechanics that make detecting this kind of problem way more challenging to solve and way more interesting to look at. So let's take a brief look at Super Metroid and look at some of the game mechanics that make it a much more interesting problem in that domain. So Super Metroid is a platformer made by Nintendo in 1994. It has basic movement like jumping. We have running jumps that increase your velocity and allow you to jump further. And we also have an item system where you pick up items that change the way that you can move. So here I pick up the morphing ball. It's an item that allows me to morph into a ball. And now I can change my hitbox to go through this small passageway. And so before we had the morph ball, we had to jump over this thing, but now that we have that, we can go through this passageway. Later in the game, we use the morph ball to go through a passageway and pick up an item called the missiles. The missiles allow us to break through these pink door barriers and give us access to other areas of the game where there are other items. While there are more items than just the missiles and the morph ball, in this presentation, we're going to be focusing on just those two items, the ability to destroy the pink door caps and go through small passageways. For this paper, we created a system that can automatically find soft locks in Super Metroid levels or verify that levels don't have soft locks. In this case, if the level does have a soft lock, the system will provide a counterexample showing you what you need to do in order to get to the soft lock state, including any items that you need to pick up along the way. Before we talk about how the system actually works, let's contextualize this a little bit. So here's an image from Somerville and Matthias's 2016 paper called Super Mario as a String. They used LSTMs to generate Super Mario levels. And as you can see, the path that Mario takes through the level is part of the data used to generate. So in the original levels, you can annotate them with how Mario is supposed to travel through the level. And then in the output, you can get the same kind of annotation back, and hopefully the new level will be playable. I'm bringing this up to show you just how big of a difference there is between Super Mario and Super Metroid. In Super Metroid, the two-dimensional player position isn't enough information to tell you what actions the player can take, because you also need to know things about the player's velocity and item set. Furthermore, the assumption that traveling from left to right equals progress isn't true in Super Metroid. To complete the game, the player has to constantly travel through rooms that they've already visited with new items in order to travel to new locations. People have created systems that can automatically detect whether a certain level design is completable for many games, including Mario. However, that just scratches the surface of all the different player experiences that can happen within that level. Softlock detection adds to this picture. In order to automatically detect soft locks, we use model checking, which is a formal method often used to verify systems with complex internal state like network protocols. In this case, the system is modeled as a glorified graph, which we call a Kripke structure. There are a few additional features of a Kripke structure. It has a set of start nodes, and some nodes are labeled with semantic information. In this case, the only label we need is a label for the goal node. If we imagine that this graph is the state graph for a game, this game has a soft lock. The player can travel to the region circled in red, and if they do, they can never reach the goal state. They'll just keep circling around this cycle. We can express the notion of whether a graph has a soft lock using computation tree logic, a type of temporal logic for reasoning about paths in graphs. In CTL, there are two main operators, AG and EF. EF P for some property P means that there exists a path such that eventually P will hold. This graph satisfies EF goal because there is a path from the start state to the goal state. AGP is the dual of EF, meaning for all paths globally, P holds. This graph does not satisfy AGEF goal because there is a path from the start node to a state that no longer satisfies EF goal, the first softlock state. In this state, we can keep traveling from state to state, but it is impossible to reach the goal. So applying this to Super Metroid, if we had access to the state graph of Super Metroid, we could easily verify this property. In terms of code, we used a library called PyModelChecking, and once you've created an appropriate graph, it's very simple to check whether the graph satisfies a formula, although it might take a long time if the graph is large. So that all sounds great if we had access to the state graph of Super Metroid, but we don't, and there's lots of good reasons why we don't want to use frame-by-frame emulation to do this. Primarily, there'd just be way too many states to do any kind of model checking. So we created an approximation of Super Metroid's movement, which models items and velocity. This approximation tracks the player's position to the nearest tile, and we model the various actions that the player can take with respect to the level data near the player. For example, the morph rule shown models the action of turning into a ball, and it requires that the player have the morph ball item in order to use that action. This approximation narrows down the state space to a tractable size for model checking, and while it's necessarily imperfect, it can still provide useful information about softlocks to level designers. Now that you've seen the basic ideas behind how our system works, let's jump into an example. So this is part of the original game that I showed off during the introduction. We're going to modify this level design in order to create a softlock, and then we'll use our system to find it. In this image, you're seeing a pared down view of the original level with all the tile images removed. We've also created a visualization of the start state, which is in the middle, and the goal state on the right for this level design. First, we're going to add a passageway to the left, which is blocked by missiles and requires morph ball to escape. The pit is too high to jump out of normally. The softlock that we introduced relies on giving the player access to missiles before the morph ball, so we'll also remove these blocks that prevent that. This level design now has a softlock, and I'll show it to you. So here I'm playing a modified version of Super Metroid, which actually has the changes that we just made. I'm going over to this area where we picked up the missiles originally, and I'm going to pick up the missiles before the morph ball, which is something you couldn't do in the original level design. This is going to enable me to get softlocked over where we added the passageway earlier. So here I pick up the missiles, and then I travel back to where we added the softlock. In this case, traversing this section is a little more challenging than usual because you don't have the morph ball, which would allow you to do that section more easily. So now that we're back at where we would normally pick up the morph ball, instead of picking it up, we can jump over it and then use the missiles to open this blocked section that enables us to access this passageway. Now we're stuck because we don't have the morph ball that would allow us to escape from this passage. Believe it or not, the video that I just showed you was something that a computer told me how to do. Here's a counterexample generated by our system when applied to the same level. It's a lot messier than watching the playthrough, but all the same information is there. Each Samus in this picture indicates a player state, and the colored arrows represent the flow of time. Blue arrows are state transitions that happen earliest in the sequence, and as the arrows become more red, they happen later in the sequence. So we start below the elevator with the bluest arrows, and travel to the right to obtain the missiles as the arrows become purple. As the arrows become maroon, they indicate traveling back across the passage after acquiring the missiles. And the red arrows show jumping over the morph ball and falling into the pit to become stuck. We can also use our system to show that a level is softlock free modulo our movement approximation. The system verifies that this level design, without the crucial ability to pick up missiles early, does not have a softlock. Now the player must obtain the morph ball before picking up the missiles, and although they can still access the pit with the missiles, now they can use the morph ball to become unstuck. In this case, a small, seemingly innocent change on one side of this level design is enough to create a softlock state on the other side of the level. This type of detail can be difficult for even experienced human designers to catch, but we can verify a level of this size in a few seconds. Gaining access to an approximation of the state space of a game can be useful for other reasons. In this image, we use spectral embedding to create a two-dimensional embedding of the state space. The states are color-coded by what items the player has, and we can see that the state space is locally one-dimensional based on item collection. At most points in this level design, the player can only choose to make forward progress towards the next item or backtrack to where they came from. This image is a hybrid embedding of the state space, where each state's position is a mixture of its position in the game world and its position in the spectral embedding we just saw. This image shows how item progression logic maps onto the two-dimensional game world to create an extremely intricate structure. In Mario, it was convenient to imagine that the state space was two-dimensional, but this view ignores the fundamental complexity of many games. Our paper is about solving a very specific problem, detecting one type of bug in a single game. But the bug and the game that we chose both serve to address two important oversimplifications. The first is about playability. A playable level is completable, and many PCG systems have completability checkers as part of quality assurance. However, being softlock free is another aspect of level design playability, and there are many other equally important parts of playability, such as being at an appropriate challenge level. Translating these concepts into temporal logic and then verifying levels is one way to control for many types of bad player experiences. If you can reduce your game to a graph, you can use model checking to verify temporal logic formulas, and as we've just seen, even simple formulas can be expressive enough to help catch subtle bugs. The other oversimplification that we address in this paper is the difference between a game's state space and its play area. In Super Mario Bros., the state space and play area are often treated as the same thing. However, in Super Metroid, we can see that the in-game item hierarchy dramatically affects how the player can traverse a given level. A lot of level design generation research focuses on Super Mario Bros. And other NES games with similar mechanics. Methods that successfully generate playable Mario-like levels can fail in Super Metroid and other more complex games because of oversimplified assumptions about player state. It's important to start addressing the challenges of item hierarchies and backtracking in generation and automated testing. Thank you for coming to my talk on softlock detection in Super Metroid with computation tree logic. I'm Rossman Horder, and this has been joint work with my advisor, Adam Smith. If you stick around, the question period will start soon. Thank you.